Hi everybody, welcome to this first local body, day 6th of June. I have sat on this committee many times and I have convened. Morning. Before we go any further, let me just introduce the top table to you all. First of all, myself, I am Councillor Bob Braun. I am the convener of the body. My left is Councillor Claire McCarran. Right, James. Body. My far right is Mr. Ross Burton, planning advisor to the LRB, who is not part of the planning department and he has had no previous any of the applications on the agenda today. My far left is Mr. Jeff Fogg, who is our legal advisor to the LRB today. At the far end, beyond him, Mr. Daniel Williams, who is committee services. Before we start on the agenda, there's a couple of things I would like to say today with me at the arena. Firstly, my thanks to my predecessor on this committee, former councillor Lewis Simpson, been the LRB several years. I can't remember exactly how many, but it was certainly more than 2, and throughout the pandemic, which was obviously difficult to do as everything was fine. So my thanks to him for his work on this committee. And I'd also like to thank Mr. David Harrison, who was our previous independent consultant. This committee, certainly for many years, certainly my I believe he's now retired, so I hope that we can both and have that recorded in minutes. Secondly, I would like to take this opportunity to publicly congratulate Her Majesty the Queen on achieving her Platinum Jubilee, event unique in over 2,000 years of history. I suspect not to be seen again, even in our grandchildren's time. Congratulations. Finally, what I like to do if these days coincide, a reminder to everybody that 78 years ago today, the world was witnessing the greatest armada ever seen. Allied forces made the first steps to liberate Europe from Nazi tyranny. By this time, just after 10 o'clock, Allied forces were already ashore on Gold, Sword, Juneau, Utah, and Omaha beaches, suffering significant losses, particularly the American forces at Omaha Beach. The sacrifices made on that day, the 6th of June, ever known as D-Day, longest day, should never be forgotten. Be remembered by all years to come. Thank you for that. And we'll now move on, as we do, to the agenda for the day. First of all, members, may I ask, are there any declarations of interest in this agenda today?
There we go. None from me, thank you.
Thank you very much. We now turn to the minutes of the previous meeting. Are we happy to agree the minutes on the previous meeting? Noted.
Noted.
Agreed by me as well. Very much. That, members, will now move on to the agenda. So we now have our first application to consider. With an erection of a boundary wall, West Lodge, Caravan Park, from brief. Now pass over to Mr. Burton to introduce it.
Thank you, Chair. Before I start my presentation, we can run through the pictures which I've taken. The application is for proposal is for erection of a boundary wall at the Caravan Park. You see on the screen Caravan Park in its entirety. Red line shows the actual application site. Triangle to the site, south of the site. Looking along the A85 towards Caravan Park left, see lighter coloured, recently erected walls, which are part of the application. The application is partly in retrospect for the erection of these walls. They are demolition of the existing wall, part of the listing of the gatehouse. So we'll see in a minute, still there. So the application is for both partly in red. Next, it's another view of see it, and it's sort of a stone. It's there for grass verde. Next slide, please. This shows the entrance feature. View wall curves round gates. The background there, see which remains. Slide, please. This one looks in the direction. It's been formed by view wall on the car park parking area. See both walls. Which is light distinct. Just be demolished. Building on the right there. So this entrance is the entrance. Next slide, please. It's a detail of the dispersion walkway, so as you can see by that gives you a bit more. Then within the car park, existing stone wall is on the left. Quite substantial area. Slide, please. A bit of detail. See, separates the car park. Slide, please. There has been access gate cut to allow pedestrians. That's the only change. It's a stone wall. Slide. Which shows the application. So I'll run through the applicant's case, and then the route of handling, reasons for refusal, any representations, and then I'll run through material considerations, observations. Keep this as brief as I can. The applicant's case is the proposed layout contains the core path that runs along the front of the site. The verge has been retained. The wall which is attached to the West Lodge is not, the agent believes, listed. It also includes retaining a short stretch of the wall to the building. Proposed works, some of which have been carried out, enhance the appearance and setting of the listed building. The report of handling states that the wall which is proposed for demolition is listed because of its association with the listed West Lodge. It was formerly the gatehouse for Lawyer's House. West Lodge is now used as the office for the caravan park. Historic Environment Scotland's guidance on boundaries states that it's important to understand and protect their key characteristics. The applicant has submitted no justification for the demolition of the wall. The demolition and the construction of the new wall have a direct adverse effect on the listed building. The result is contrary to Policy 7B, Development Plan 2019. Loss of the grass verge and shrub planting, which previously formed a boundary to the caravan park, has had an adverse effect on the character and visual amenity and its setting, contrary to policies 1A and B, which required the new development to make a positive contribution to the quality of the environment. a single reason for refusal, the adverse impact on the character and visual amenity of the site and the listed building. A single reason is given for refusal. Adverse impact on the character and visual amenity of the site and the listed building. So it is contrary to the policies 27A, protection of listed buildings. It says that new development should respect the character. No representations from members of the public. It's important to note Transport Scotland requested further information on the potential impact on the verge maintenance and road safety. The application was asked to provide a risk assessment for the reconfigured entrance. The files available online, this doesn't appear to be carried out. The agent has stated that these elements have been sorted. There is nothing from Transport Scotland. They are happy with the risk assessment. Until a formal response has been received from Transport Scotland on these issues, particularly relating to road safety, the response so far means that the Council need to take full account of the interests of Transport Scotland as a statutory consultee agency of the Scottish Government. The effect is that the committee are minded to grant permission today. Decision would have to be minded to grant, which would then have to be notified to the government. Actual decision notice be issued, and the government would then have to have time to consider the matter. Policies, material considerations, policies raised in the report of handling, material considerations, as is the stance of Transport Scotland. And observations from the case that I've gleaned from the case. The new wall has been built, and the listed wall, which was proposed for demolition remains. A gateway has been cut into the listed wall at its far end, away from the lodge to give pedestrian access. It's not clear on the ground whether the listed wall is still proposed for retention, as the caravan park appears to operate satisfactorily. The agent has been asked to clarify this on 2 occasions, but there's been no response. Now, happy to take any further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Burton. Councillor James.
Sorry, convener. I'm a little confused. I'm just looking at their review document 2.4. It says we believe that revised submission demonstrate all the valid concerns could be satisfactorily addressed. Now, amongst those concerns, survey Transport Scotland.
There's nothing from, I can't see anything in the online file, Matt, so I have to assume no. There's certainly no Transport Scotland online case file saying that they're satisfied risk assessment.
So McLaren, any questions?
Yes, a question relating to the new has been erected. Just to clarify for me, has that come under this planning application, or is that a separate planning application? Or indeed, is there any planning application for that erection of new wall?
Yes, the application is for the, as they call it, the reconfiguration of the wall. So the application is for the new erection of the new wall and demolition of the existing wall.
Thank No further questions.
I myself don't have any questions as such. At this point, normally I would suggest that we decide whether we have to proceed, but I have to say I think there's some queries here, and I am trying to defer this to clarify certain points. I'd like to find out whether the applicants still want to demolish the wall. Given the photographs we have of access for vehicles and the small pedestrian access that's put in, whether they really do need this wall to be demolished now, because it would put the car park abut the car park right up against caravans, and the wall, as it stands, acts as a natural barrier between car park and caravan. So that's a point I think we need to clarify, and also with regards to Transport Scotland's remarks, we haven't had a response yet. That's been resolved. So I'm of a mind actually further. I'm sure my colleagues are happy. I'll ask Mr. Fogg if we're worded that correctly too. But that is my thought at this stage. So I'll ask Councillor James.
I would agree with you, because I said at the beginning I was a little confused, because this is for the erection of a boundary wall. What we're looking at is for the erection. It doesn't say anywhere here about retrospect, and there's issues with some issues that you mentioned there. So yes, I think.
Councillor McLaren.
Yes, I do agree with you to refer for further information, particularly Transport Scotland. There is a concern the E85, the very busy main trunk route west, and many HGVs, bus routes. So Transport Scotland's opinion to be considered in this issue. I'm also noting that possibly by the erection of the new wall, that the operators are demonstrating that there maybe is not even a need for demolition of the structure as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fogg. I think is the deferred occasion.
Learning the new structure. Yes, I've noted the unanimous position of this morning, which is to defer the application for additional information, specifically, firstly, to clarify if the applicant still wishes to demolish the original wall, given the current configuration. Seen in terms of the operation now of photographs that were displayed this morning. Secondly, whether Transport Scotland have received and are content with the further transport information that the agent obtaining submitted, so we can write to the applicant for that twofold purpose. And
Mr. Fogg, then the decision is to defer the case. Thank you very much. So we'll now move on to item 4.2. This relates to alterations and extension. Dwelling house, alterations to garage to form ancillary accommodation and associated works at 5 Duncan's Place in Burnham. Over to Mr. Burton to introduce that.
Thank you, Chair. It's a fairly straightforward application. An extension to the main house at 5 Duncan's Place, and an extension to a change of use of existing garage for ancillary accommodation. Take you through the pictures first, and then take you through a brief report. The aerial shot shows the application site centre of there. You can see the house. There's a red line around the whole, and garden and garage. You can see the house. It's quite separate from the garage. The garage has a front which is accessed off the area is characterised by similar properties. Some with detached garages and some with next slide. Looking towards the house, that's the application as you can see behind the hedge, and the garage is to the right. You can see the garage beyond the driveway is just on this side of the darker green. Slide, please. This is a shot in towards the garage. You see the house, the gable of the house, and there's a double width driveway. Next slide, please. Straight onto the garage, standard size of garage. The proposal is to extend it, lift to there. It's the just to extend it to walk. Next slide, please. That is the gable wall of the garage, which extend towards slide, please. Down towards the rear of the house, the extension to the house would come out rear far side of the house. Shape part of the rear garden away from the garage. Next slide, please. So you can see that the garage quite distinct from the house at the moment, but the extension would move and affect the garage slightly closer to it. Turning towards the application, the house extension would project into the garden area, which on the slide there is to the north. That would extend. The garage would be extended towards the main house and would be they'd provide a kitchen, living bedroom, and a bath. The ancillary accommodation provided would be separate from the main house, as can be seen, but would share a driveway garden. The report of handling gives no issues with the proposed extension to the house, but reasons for refusal are to do with the extension and change of use of the garage. The lack of physical and functional relationship of the garage to the main house is mentioned. Siting does not, and the siting does not respect the character and communication. This part of the proposal is seen as contrary to its making guide, which seeks to discourage particularly large, dominant, and suitable, inappropriately designed or located developments not in keeping with existing built form. The reason for refusal is that the application is contrary to facility and supplementary guidance, which seeks to discourage proposals with no physical relationship principal dwelling house, which would lead to the creation of a new residential unit. The applicant's case is that the extension is seen as acceptable. The focus of refusal is on ancillary accommodation. So the applicant's case is going to focus on that. Conversion of a garage to form additional space is a common form of development, and in most cases would be. I'll discuss that further in the area of considerations. Garage is in close proximity to the house, has a current functional relationship, and is used for storage. Ancillary living space created is intended for use by the applicant's elderly relatives when they visit. Joined to the house by a landscaped common garden. Conversion would not alter the skyline or look profile or impact its setting. The design and the density complements its surroundings and would not impact on the surrounding area. Extension and the extended garage are both designed to be subservient to the main house and private rear garden area. Existing refuse storage and collection arrangements would not change. Supplementary guidance on ancillary accommodation was approved by the council after the application was submitted. It complies with the guidance. It is clearly subordinate to the main house and has an established relationship. It's noted that the height of the garage is not changing. There was a representation from a neighbour who suggested that other neighbours hadn't been consulted at the application. That's not a material consideration. Turning to material considerations, Class 3A of householder limited development rights allows the provision within the curtilage of a dwelling house of a building for any purpose incidental to the enjoyment of that dwelling house or the alteration, maintenance or improvement of such a building. This would allow the extension to the garage as proposed, but it wouldn't allow its use as a dwelling. So it isn't. So it wouldn't be permitted development. The fact that this supplementary guidance was introduced after the submission of the application does not mean it should not be assessed under this guidance. The application stands to be assessed against any policies or guidance in place at the time of decision. Turning to observations, there's no doubt that the extension and use of the garage as a dwelling requires planning permission. There's also no doubt that this sort of conversion to provide ancillary accommodation for a family member, a granny flat, or a son or daughter, in this case, provide accommodation for the elderly relatives from time to time when they visit is not uncommon. The control which is open to the committee, if you're minded to grant permission, be a condition which could be attached to the consent, that the extended garage, the ancillary accommodation created by the extended garage, not be used, sold, or let separately from the business. I have a draft condition which could be discussed, so decides.
Thank you, Mr. Burton. We'll go to questions. I have just one question, if I may, first of all, just to clarify the proposed ancillary building for the garage. I'm assuming it would services, gas, water, electric, sewage, all on its own, and would be correct on that.
That's correct, Chair.
Thank you. And Councillor McLaren, any questions?
Thank you. My question, I did note that transport didn't have an issue, but looking at this picture here, there's clearly a turning circle to the right, which is for the use of vehicles exiting Kingsdown Place. So to assume that possibly it's 3 vehicles that are accessing the site of this application. There's only street parking for 2 vehicles. Across the road from the application site, the driveways of 2 houses exist. So there is a question of vehicles accessing any property or things Duncan Place Road. That's something we could address.
It's open to the committee to of these elements. If committee feel that some element of residential amenity be adversely impact, then that's that committee duty to consider. I would suggest that the lack of any parking restrictions in Duncan's Place It's what read transportation section council.
Thank you. No further questions. Thank
Councillor James.
I don't have any further questions. Mr. Burton's answered the one thing. Oh, just a point of clarity. Mr. Burton, just looking at reason for refusal, 85 of our papers. The last item, the third item, reference to supplementary guidance. Are you saying this fits within that item? Sorry.
I read the supplementary guidance, and it's. I would say it's not definite on that point. The applicant's agent takes the view that it does fit supplementary guidance. The handling report and refusal suggests that the council takes a different view.
And preliminary decision. So, members, can we proceed to determine the application for review on the basis of the information before us? That is, the information contained within the papers and the presentation by the planning advisor. Or do we require more information? Councillor McLaren.
you. Don't believe
Thank you very much. Councillor James.
Yeah, more than happy to proceed.
Thank you. Then we are now in a position to assess the case and move to debate. Occasion. Lead off this one. I've read through all the paperwork that we have. Had similar situations like this before, as ancillary accommodation proposed. In those cases, the ancillary accommodation has relied upon the main house for services, electricity, etc. And in most cases, there is an argument for it. But in this case, as we've heard, the proposed accommodation, new accommodation in the garage, be self-contained completely with services. And I am of the not be main house. Okay. Feel on this occasion that I must uphold the decision made by the planning officers. Note also within the application the main house, which do not seem to have caused problems. Open obviously to the applicant to apply based on the alterations only. But on this occasion, with regards to the application, and for me, I am happy to uphold it by the planning. Cameron.
on this matter, this application to vision by the plan set out. Sure.
Councillor James.
Thanks, convener. And sadly, well, not sadly actually, I would have actually allowed this. I'm personally looking for a new house at the moment, and I've seen this sort of development. We're encouraging people to adapt for future use. This would have been a perfect solution to family problem. And in all honesty, I don't think the out of place. I think Duncan's
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Simpson used to say separate thoughts on this, but it's a majority decision. So on this occasion, decisions to uphold the officer's decision. Mr. Fogg, is there anything you wish to add at all? No, nothing at all. Fine. Thank you very much, members. Then that case concluded. We now move on to next application, which is 4.3, and this relates to a residential development in principle, land 45 metres south of Oakley, Vaughan's Holdings in Vaughan. Once again, I'll ask Burton to push the item.
Thank you, Chair. The application is for it's an application for permission in principle to develop housing in an open space in the centre of Vaughan's Holdings. There's a fair planning history to this going back to 1994, which I'll cover when I in the discussion. I would just say at this stage that the status of the open space has changed and it is now within the settlement envelope. Just, that's the difference from the situation at the last refusal. But I'll take you through the photographs first, and then looking at the aerial picture, you can see it's a large open space bounded by the main road to the north, Walnut Grove, the private road serving the houses you can see along the south side of Walnut Grove. South. Slide, please. This is looking at the application site. See, there's a flat area with a hedge, a substantial hedge close to its length, main road. Picture there, you can see the houses fronting it. Slide, please. This is looking main road. The site is behind the large hedge. See there. So there are houses on the other side of the road. See. Slide, please. At it from the other end, you can see the entrance to Walnut Grove left, and the large hedge stretching away. Next slide, please. This is looking at the site from it's just a grass, an open field. You see the houses on Walnut Grove side. The hedge at the far side is bounded to the next slide, please. This is an adjacent site which recently gained planning permission for housing, mentioned by the applicant agent. Best to bring this to your attention. Next slide, please. It's the adjacent site. The application site is just to the left of that. Signboard that you saw in the previous slide, just to the right. Permission has been granted. There's development there. There's also flat and grass, although this is actually brownfield. It's never been developed. Next slide, please. Yeah, that's looking at that's the other end of Walnut. It's the relationship between the site which has planning permission, the right hand side, the application site that we're discussing today, on the other side of Walnut. See there where the tree is standing. Next slide. Yeah. So the proposal is to develop the central portion of the site, housing, and to develop the eastern and western ends of the site. Base. 5 houses are shown on a plan submitted with the application. Access from a shared driveway should have a single point of access from Dundee. No indicative plans for the houses have been submitted. The applicant's agent makes reference to single-storey and attic. I would assume from that stories housing in that area. A brief rundown of the site history. An application for the erection of 5 houses was refused in 1994, and for residential development was refused in 1996. 2008, an application for residential development and formation of public open space was refused. That application was taken to appeal, which in this case went to the reporters unit of the government. Dismissed. The planning permission was refused for that. The applicant's case is that the application site is adjacent to a site which has planning permission for housing, and a proposal application notice has been submitted for major development adjacent to that, which would include a museum, hotel, holiday accommodation, retail uses, and a park and ride facility. If both these applications proposals are developed, all the land, the application site, and the A90. The application would be a sensitive development of the site with houses well integrated, enhanced space. The indicative layout submitted was much of the existing hedge which runs along Old Dundee Road. Local Development Plan Policy 6 states that built development contained within settlement boundary. The application site is located within Kinfond's settlement boundary. Council's most recent housing land audit suggests that the Greater Perth and Kinross housing market has a supply of 4.5 years. The application site is effective in terms of the council's criteria. So the argument is that this application, if granted, would help to address the half year's balance outstanding in housing markets, housing supply. The report of handling makes the point the site is within the Kinfond settlement area as defined in the local 2018. That and also zoned the site as open space. It's also within the Sidlaw Hills local landscape area. In terms of TAPE plan, there are no specific policies relate to the proposal. Perth and Kinross Local Development Plan 2 adopted in 2019. Policy 14A is relevant, which seeks to protect against the loss of open areas of defined open space. The loss of areas of defined open space. Applications for open space will not be permitted unless proposal is ancillary to a recreational use, proposal is minor and will not affect the main use of the site, the proposal would provide a better quality facility, it involves a playfield strategy. The appraisal against that policy is that the proposal cannot be considered to meet any of these criteria, those contrary to say 14A. Report of handling also gives the view that the indicative design and layout is not in keeping with the character and the settlement. Also be contrary to placemaking policies, which require developments to contribute positively to the built natural environment. As policies 1A and 1B placemaking. Development of the site would also erode local distinctiveness by developing the buffer space between Old Dundee Road and houses on Walnut Grove. This is claimed would make it contrary to policy 39A. It goes on to say the development would dominate the central section of the designated open space, which would create a more urban entrance to the settlement. Consequent adverse impact on visual amenity. 12 representations to the application were received, including one from West Carrs Community Council. Go through the grounds of the representations. The first 4 grounds were given by the local council, local community council, and some of the other representations. These are: it's contrary to the local plan, have an adverse effect on the character and amenity of the area, drainage issues, and the history of refusals for similar development site. Other representations brought up items, elements such as main sewerage being insufficient, flood risk of the site, impact on visual amenity, impact on residential amenity, traffic and road safety, loss of trees, impact on wildlife, no requirement for a park, loss of or change to the existing view, and construction noise. To sum up the material considerations the application, Perth and Kinross Local Development Plan was adopted in 2019. It brought about a change to the status of the site in policy terms. It brought it within the settlement boundary and it designated it as open space, which means that policy 14A of the local development plan. Change of status also means that the principal reason the previous applications were refused, housing in the countryside, is no longer relevant. Other LDP policies which are relevant to the proposal are also identified in the planning officer's handling report. Policies 1A, 1B, 39A. The issue of flooding, which is raised as an objection, is material to the extent that the site is potentially liable to flooding from surface water. Acceptable drainage strategy would need to be submitted with any application. And observation, to finish with observations, the fact that planning permission has been granted on an adjacent site is not the consideration, as each case stands to be decided on its own merits. It's also worth noting that the site which has planning permission adjacent is brownfield land, previously used as a park with adjacent commercial use. It's also not explicitly, in fact, it wasn't identified as open space. Thank you, and I'm happy to take questions.
You answered one of my questions. Councillor James, any questions?
Mr. Burton gave a great presentation.
Councillor McLaren.
Yes, thank you. I have one question. Summary 1.6. The field is unsuitable for agriculture. Any documentation to back this statement up? I missed.
I could see nothing on the case file that would back. As far as I'm aware, no.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's just in the local area there are there's evidence of crops going in fields. So it's just a statement that says field plants for agriculture.
Members, can we proceed to determine the application for review on the basis of the information before us? The information contained in papers and by the advisor, or do we require more information? Councillor James.
I don't need any more information. I'm happy to proceed.
Councillor McLaren.
Happy to proceed.
Then we'll proceed to debate. Can I ask you, Councillor James, having considered the applicant's papers, Board of Handling, Perth and Kinross Local Development Plan, and all other relevant material, and consider material planning considerations, can I ask you to start, please?
Yep, thanks, Convener. This is an in principle, and the principle we're being asked is somewhere that's would we risk the trees being locked down, and would we in principle be happy with loss of green space? And those three questions, I would say no, even in principle. I know the plan they've put is only indicative. It's 5 houses squeezed in space with the loss of the green space that goes with it. A play park doesn't, in my mind, green space, you know, far more than. The other issue, you know, you have these green spaces using, and we're dealing with issues with green space where within, I think, space and then going back to bite us years in advance. So in this instance, I think planners got it right, and I would uphold the decision.
Councillor McLaren, having considered the applicant's papers, report of handling, earth and curiosity, all other relevant material planning considered. Now for your comment.
I to uphold the decision of the planners, evidence submitted. Strong enough argument to why we would deviate from the LDP. Back up. Councillor James has just stated about loss of space. The site is zoned as space. Possibly in the next LDP review, this classification of the site may change and the applicant use of the site.
Very much. Given the comments already, my decision probably isn't such a point now, but I'm going to concur with my two colleagues. This site is a designated open space. That is an important consideration. I know the site history is that an application has been put forward on several occasions, and including one which was due to use the appeal. I think that's a relevant matter. The land hasn't changed; it's still as it is. It's still open space, and therefore, given those considerations, I can see no reason why we should change the decision of officers on this case. I appreciate that the land adjacent has got planning, but that is not a material consideration. Given that the situation as it is, it hasn't changed, I think this application with the decision, reasons for the decision should stand. And that's the decision on the application. Mr. Falk, is there anything you wish to add?
No, Commissioner, just maybe a very small point, perhaps for the applicant's benefit. I think it would have to advise that the grant of consent for the adjoining site probably is regarded as a material consideration, but it's a matter for you how much you're entitled to take with you that not of sufficient import to justify departing from the part to say it's relevant. There are different factors there, as Mr. Burton said, brownfield land, unlike this, quite goes back to your consideration, but the weighting and the differences applying to it could cause you to have.
Thank you, Mr. Augustine. Corrected. Yes, it is those considerations that I feel we stand as a unanimous decision. Decision plan. Very much. So we now move to the final this morning. It's 4 alterations and extension to a dwelling house, Brambles, Uni Street, Abernethy. I'll ask Mr. Burton to.
Thank you, Chair. It's a fairly straightforward application for to raise the height of the roof of a single-storey dwelling in the street, and to provide a combination of 2 rooms and a bathroom in the roof, and to give them and to 2 box dormers, right windows space. Through the slides first, and then a brief presentation. You see the application site is at the end of Cluny Street, which is a short cul-de-sac. It's a substantial bungalow, surrounded by single-storey and 2-storey houses. Houses you can see immediately north are single-storey. Houses south on the other side of Cluny Street are a mix of single and 2-storey. Houses west down the street are also a mixture of 2 stories. Slide, please. see that's the if you're looking along the street towards, so you can't see the house itself. It's just for that white arrows part. You see the two-story housing distinct to the right, to closest to the application, to the edge of the photograph on the right hand side, the house which was single story and gained function to, as you can see now, have its roof raised and have accommodation in the next slide, please. That's the gable of the house, the house on the left hand side there. The proposal would raise the ridge height by just over a metre. Next. Back down Cluny Street, the application is on the right. You can see the closest building to it down Cluny Street, single story. But beyond that, there's a row two-story terrace house. Next slide, please. Just looking at the house straight on. See the houses right hand side, which are single story. Slide, please. That's the front of the house within the property. Dormers would be on the rear of the house. Next slide. These are the houses on the other side. From see the one at the end is two-story, but most single story. Slide, please. And that is the garden house towards down Cluny Street. Slide, please. That's taken from the rear garden northwards. This is the join. You can see there's an adjoining. There's a garden, which is the first way you see the wall. Slide, please. Slide. You can see from that the house immediately to the left has driveway, some garden space, and some adjacent boundary of the site. See very then of larger garden just beyond site boundary. Turn to the presentation. The application property is a substantial boundary at the end of a short cul-de-sac, mix of single and two-story houses. It's proposed to raise the height of the roof of the building, 2 rooms and a bathroom on another. Box dormers are proposed on the north side of the roof, the applicant's garden, part of the rear gardens with adjacent properties to the north and west. A new entry porch is also proposed to the south side of the house facing Cluny Street. The applicant's case is that the case officer did not undertake a site visit, instead relied on Cluny Street and the Google Street View, which is out of date. Specifically, the house on the opposite side of Cluny Street has a box dormer on front elevation. If we could maybe go to the slide again, it shows that. Yeah, no, that's it. That the property on the right hand side of the photograph there is referred to by the applicant. It was granted permission I think 3 years ago, and as the applicant says, there's not a street view site. That house is mentioned is raised by the applicant because it has a box dormer on the front elevation with the dormer sitting on the wall head, similar to the proposal that we're considering here. It's contended that the proposed extension is appropriate in terms of Cluny Street and its surroundings, Dormers are designed as separate, two dormers, to minimise their impact on massing. Despite this, the report of handling appears to consider them as a single mass. Each dormer taken on its own takes up less than half of the rear of the application property is not viewed from the street. The suggestion by the case officer that the dormers should be set back by 300 millimetres cannot be technically achieved. In any case, it is contended that such a small change would make a appreciable difference visually. The impact of the westernmost dormer on the neighbouring property is also disputed. The neighbouring property's main private area is on the other side of the garden from the boundary application property. And if we go back to the aerial photograph, see that the part of the adjacent garden to Looney Street doesn't appear to be used as a private garden area. Green area tucked away behind the L shape of the house on the street. So that I think is what the applicant is referring to. The area, which is the concern of the case officer, is used mainly for parking. Report of handling states that the proposal would see the ridge height of the roof raised by 1100 millimetres and two dormers which, because of their size and location on the wall head, would have significant massing. Council's guidance on house extensions requires dormers to be below the ridge line, set back from the wall head and have pitched roofs. To relate to the existing building's windows and doors, not to extend to more than half of the length. While the dormers would be set below the extended ridge line, the combined width would exceed half of the roof. The dormer to the western end of the building is proposed to have a Juliet balcony, which should be close to the boundary west, and would have the potential to overlook that property's private garden. Attempts to have the dormers redesigned to fit guidance better were not by the applicant. Two reasons for refusal following this assessment are that the dormers would be an unsympathetic and incongruous addition to the property, contrary to the Council's placemaking guide and policies 1A, 1B, and that the westernmost dormer would give rise to a loss of privacy for the neighbouring, contrary to policy 17 of the law, which seeks to protect residential amenity. No representations received. Turning to material considerations, the fact that another house on Cluny Street has a recently built dormer is something that the committee might wish to bear in mind of the consistency of the council's decision-making process. It is not, strictly speaking, a material consideration, as each case stands to be decided on its own merits. Council's guidance with regard to household extensions is a material consideration. It's undoubtedly true that the two dormers are separate and do not form a single mass. Guidance relates to the entirety of an extension. The case officer's assessment, two dormers taken together cover more than the width of the roof is correct. There will also be inevitably a measure of overlooking the dormer closest to the boundary of the neighbouring property west. This is a material consideration as it directly relates to the council's making policies. It's for the committee to decide whether these two issues in themselves are sufficient to declare a refusal of the application. Turning to observations, Cluny Street has a mixture of single-storey and two-storey houses. The proposal to extend into the roof space to form not an issue of contention. That was what was approved in the house on the opposite side of Cluny Street, mentioned by the applicant. The only issues are whether the proposed dormers are acceptable within the street scene, whether the overlooking issue give rise to a loss of residential amenity residents of the neighbouring house. Thank you. I'm happy to.
Thank you, Mr. Burton. Open up to questions. I just have one query. I read in the paperwork that they had a more sympathetic the other way, so the over the council bed. the applicant seems any reason.
I'm not, apart from the applicant's wishes to allocate the space as they propose, I'm not aware of any reason. Doubt though, granted 2 rooms, the council cannot control these rooms.
Councillor McLaren.
Thank you. I hear all person saying mixed housing in the area already. Across the street, planning permission has been granted for a similar summer. Bit of a question: is it possible that by raising the roof height by this height that we developed windows would be as opposed to a dormer?
I think that the answer to that is probably no. The amount of usable space is such that it
Further questions?
So James.
No further questions from me, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Then we're in a decision. So again, I'll ask members, can we proceed to determine the application for review on the basis of the information before us? That is the information contained within the papers presentation by the advisor. Do we require any more information? Councillor McLaren.
Further information? Proceed. Happy to proceed.
Councillor James.
I'm happy to proceed.
Very much. Okay. Then I'll start off on this one. Okay. This is a new, as always, some of these are usual ones to think about, and it's a process, I suppose. There's no right here, but I am, based on the information given to us by the visual photographs by Burton Station, I am inclined in this case to the appeal applicant. Yes, there is another dorm window in the opposite, which bear in mind, but I don't think it's a question as such. But these windows are going to be put at the rear of the house, be a little bit of overlooking on around adjacent, which doesn't seem greenery. Just the other door window will overlook on the back itself. Is at the rear of the property. Street. So my inclination here, I think, is I would agree with that. Go ahead. Let's really further. Let's see what my say. So, Councillor McLaren.
I too concur and agree. Very tricky, very, we have justifiable reasons why not, but it's a mix of housing styles within the area, out dormers are to the rear, and the garden area of the floor is parking in their main garden is the other side of their property, so the loss of privacy is possibly minimal. To
Councillor James.
Well, actually, I think, Karina, I too. I took a drive down there, to be honest, had a look, and there's no style of house. Quite a few different there, and throughout Scotland, 1.5 story houses seem quite, I don't know, half the room. Dormers make those rooms habitable, and it solves a housing problem for the owners, to be honest. Makes a small house into something that they can live in. So I'm minded to grant the
Thank you, Councillor James. So, Mr. Fogg, we have a unanimous answer to uphold the appeal on this occasion. Presumably the usual conditions to put in place.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm clear as the reasons for your decision. Are you content that some standard conditions be delegated to myself and Ross to attach to be issued?
I'm happy with that. I'm assuming my two colleagues will be happy with that as well.
Unless there's anything in particular regard you want to specify now.
I have nothing though. Very much for on this occasion the appeal is upheld on 4. That concludes today. There is only one thing I would like to add just before we close, and it's very remiss of me I didn't welcome appropriately Mr. Burton to the panel. I know he's been working online with us, but this is his first time actually appearing here, so I will apologize for not doing it up front. It's also, of course, the first time we have met physically, I think now by over 2 years. So we've had a reasonably good start. I hope a reasonably good start today. I thank you all. Thank you, Councillor James and Councillor McLaren, who stepped in last minute to form the panel. So thank you very much for that. An experience for us all, of course, on this occasion. Get used to being back in person again. And thank you, of course, Mr. Fogg, Mr. Burton, Mr. Williams, and it's running for us. So thank you all, and next time. Thank you very much. It's closed.